How are we doing, team? Welcome back to the Top Step. My name is Ryan Rowland-Smith. Really fun episode. This one, someone who I love talking to. I get a chance to talk to him and his buddies, 3:30 on 710 ESPN, 3:30 every Tuesday. It's Mr. Dave Wyman. And I feel like every time I'm talking to Dave, whether it's on the radio or just through text messages or wherever, I feel like I should be drinking a beer. That's what it kind of feels like. And I felt like, when we taped this episode, he had a show to get to, so we couldn't just be slamming beers. But I'm like, man, this would be a great episode. If we could have a few beers, maybe do it in person one of these days. But a lot of fun. So Dave Wyman played 9 years in the NFL, played for the Seahawks. We all know that here in Seattle. Then he went on to the Denver Broncos. But we got into it, man. We talked about making that transition out of an NFL career, how tough that was. He got into financial advising, and he just kind of said he felt like a fish out of water. And he hated the game too. It was interesting. He said how much he just didn't like the game. He said he felt like he was standing on that dock when the ship left. Opening day in 1995. But anyway, we dive into a bunch, and we get, we have a few laughs. It's not all depressing stuff. We do talk about COVID. We do talk about how he feels about schools getting back. He had some pretty bold things to say about that. It was awesome. Anyway, a couple updates before we get into Dave. Hey, thanks for the messages too on the website. Yeah, a lot of people have written me messages on the contact section at www.thetopstep.com. I appreciate it, man. Got some really good feedback, couple of questions. We'll get to them actually. Now, Terry asked me about Jared Kelnick. Will he make the opening day roster? Now, this is a Mariners question. I know we've got a lot of people listening from Australia and other parts of the world, but you're going to have to find out, dude. We've got baseball in less than a week. I can't believe it. My mug's going to be back on TV. I can't wait. I've been missing it massively. I'm going to do some TV and radio this week. Next couple of days, actually, I'm doing a preseason or summer camp game from the studio, and then I'm doing opening day against the Astros on Friday. So if you're in Seattle or you're watching MLB TV, make sure you tune in and join us. And Root Sports, cannot wait to get back with the crew. Cannot wait. It's going to be fun. So you're going to have to wait, dude. I can't give you that answer just yet. Don't blow me up. Jared asked if I'll still be doing this podcast once the season starts. You bloody betcha, mate. Of course I am. Doing these. Oh, man, I've got so many people who want to jump on. They've listened. A lot of friends of mine around baseball and different sports and different walks of life that I can't wait to have on the show. It's going to be fun. So yeah, absolutely, man. I'm having so much fun doing this. It's been so good. It's been good for me too, man. I know it's something Dave Wyman and I talk about, isolation and dealing with that and depression and things, all these weird little things that I've been pretty lucky, but I will say just doing this weekly has just helped me out, man. It's just got me inspired. That's the point of this podcast, to inspire you, to motivate you, and give you some funny stories along the way. Speaking of, I'll get to this one. Vicky said, I love the interview with Paul Sylvia on King 5. So I did a thing with Paul Sylvia. I was on his podcast and did some stuff on King 5 last week. She said, I love the interview with Paul Sylvia on King 5. Laughed so hard, and then went back and listened to a couple episodes on my morning drive. And the episode with Grant Balfour was seriously the hardest I've laughed in months. Thank you so much for a fun listen, and look forward to the next episode. Vicky, thank you. Now, the Balfour episode does sound like I talked about drinking a beer here with Dave Wyman. It does feel like we're just sitting at a pub. It's pretty funny. He's a funny dude. He's coming back on the show for sure. He's too funny. Big Grant Balfour. He played 10 years in the big leagues. You don't know who he is. Crazy Australian, Balfour age. Too funny. Now, Greg, a lot of people ask me about D. Gordon, if I can get D. Gordon on the show. I'd love to. I'll ask him once we get started. I'm going to ask D to come on. And Greg from New Zealand. Now, Greg, don't get mad at the jersey. If you're watching this, guys, you can see the jersey. If you're listening to it, I've got a Wallabies jersey on. All right, go check it out. It's going to be on my Facebook page, on the Ryan Rowland-Smith Facebook page. That's where I'm posting these videos lately. Some funny stuff. I'm adding little things to the videos too. So make sure you go check it out. You can also check out the cartoon I made. I need to make more, speaking of Grant Balfour. But yeah, man, last week was a good week. I got back into a nice little routine. I'm so excited about getting back to the MLB season starting. I can't tell you. I got back into boxing too. I mentioned this on the last episode with Charlie Furbush. I'm back into the boxing, and it's not because I'm looking for a title fight or anything like that. Such a good workout. It's just such a good release. Emerald City Boxing up the street from where I live here in Greenlake. Those guys are awesome. Russ, Chloe, got a great setup. Doesn't matter, all walks of life. And again, this is not a paid ad or anything like that. I think these guys are awesome, and they got such a good setup, and it's just a good vibe in there. If you're in Seattle and you want to come join me, I'm going to set something up. I want to do like a thing where we do a workout. If you're a Mariners fan, you can come in and box with me. You don't have to spar with me, but come in, do a workout, or just hang out. Come check it out. Once we open back up, I think phase 3, who knows what's happening with phase 3 at the moment. I know Governor Inslee's going to change the rules. Maybe it's only groups of 10. I'm not quite sure. But we're setting it up, man. I want to set it up where if you're a Mariners fan or you just you just want to come hang and have a boxing session, it's so therapeutic. It's awesome. I'm so glad I'm back into it. Posted a video on the on my Instagram page too. If you go to Instagram.com/-18, just like my Twitter handle, you can check it out. Now, speaking of plugs, right? Again, speaking of plugs, I've got to plug the podcast. Click the subscribe button if you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook. I don't know. I don't even know what I'm doing the video on. But if you're listening, go on Apple. Give me a review. It helps out so much. Give me a review. Apple, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, whatever you're listening on. And click the subscribe button, man, so we can keep these coming and get some good guests. But again, I'm just really excited. I'm starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. I know it's been a crazy time for everyone. We need some, we need some boxing in our life. We need some baseball. We need some sport. Dave and I talk about that a lot. Anyway, so I get to my next guest here in a second. But Dave Wyman, what an absolute legend, killing it with the Seahawks. He was doing pre and post. He's now doing in-game stuff. He's it's Bob, Dave, and more at in the afternoon show on 710 ESPN. I join him every Tuesday at 3:30, and I'm not lying when I say this. It used to be Danny O'Neill. Bob's the man. I love jumping on with him at 3:30. It's such a blast. It's one of my favorite parts of doing the broadcasting I have in the week. Hey, forgot to mention too, if on August 3rd, depending on what happens with this phase 3, I've got a baseball camp happening. Trent Olchin, he's my business partner at nextgenbaseball.com. Him and I, we do a ton of stuff for kids in Australia. We have got an awesome baseball camp where we're both coaching. People ask me this all the time. If we actually coach, yes, we do. We're there in the trenches every single day with the kids. If you know kids, you have kids. If you want to come hang out at Hidden Valley, August 3rd. And shoot me a message on thetopstep.com and I can send you the info. We'd love to have you. There's still spots available. We're going to figure out how we're going to do it. We may have to do it in groups of 10, but we're going to figure it out. We're going to make it happen. All right, guys, enjoy this episode as Dave Wyman joins me on the Top Step. We'll see you next week.
No matter what happens, Rowland-Smith has something to tell his grandkids right here. First appearance of the big leagues. Face a Hall of Famer. Especially if he strikes them out.
Here comes the 1-2 pitch to Junior now. The breaking ball. He struck him out. Yeah, that will be a story for the rest of his life as he strikes out Ken Griffey Jr. and the inning is over. But what an inning it was. And
you'll never say that I'm not killing them.
Dave, welcome, buddy. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me on, man. I was wondering when you were going to, finally ask me to come on the Bogan, what do you call it, a podcast? Is that what you call this? What do you call this thing?
It's the Bogan Hour. By the way, I got to say, speaking of the fact that the word Bogan comes up on a weekly basis, my mom, who usually be like, oh, stop calling yourself a Bogan. She loves it, by the way. She'll tune in, listen, if she can get on, like, stream it. And she's like, oh, I actually like the fact that they bring that term up. So I got you to
basically, thank. Yeah, it's like calling you a hillbilly, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Which
I dubbed you that when I saw you at the monster truck with your beautiful wife and children, this model-looking family, looked like they just stepped out of a catalog. And then I look, and there's cars that are on fire. There's one big monster truck that's eating another one. And wow, your wife, I'll tell you what.
Yeah,
she's tolerant.
She loves it more than me. Come on, let's go. Come
on.
And the fact that I was getting some looks, from here and there from, select few, but I had my son was a newborn. He had the big earmuffs on. I'm thinking to myself,
Right.
oh, is this bad? The fact that, because it was loud, dude. I love loud noise. I'm like, oh, this isn't good. But the first person that was down at Puyallup at the I think it was like the state fair. I'm trying to remember the time of year. But the first person I thought of was you. I was like, oh man, I gotta send Dave a photo. She's like, who? She's like,
honored.
It's funny because that came right after too. I think it's the year before that. I lose track of time. I was on a camping trip and you commented on a photo. It was like an RV with like a little grill.
Blue tarps.
Exactly.
A mongrel tied up to the back bumper.
Exactly. That's it. And by the way, I have a prop for you because we were talking last night. Check this out. This is from last night. Now, if you're not watching this at home, you can go and check it. It's a propane tank with a little grill out the front, a couple of deck chairs. So there you go.
Okay. All right. You got your propane grill. There you go.
It's embedded down there, just a straight Bogan. But speaking of that, so I jump on with you, Bob, and Jim every week. And I've said this before. I said it's like my favorite part of the week, jumping on. And it was you, Danny, and Jim last year. And I love Bob. So it's really I do miss Danny. I'm going to say I do miss him. I don't really hear him in the mornings. But you guys this year, obviously doing it from home, like there's a different, and obviously we're all, been dealing with this isolation, everything else. How hard is it doing that show when you guys, that afternoon show on 710 ESPN, it's all about, that chemistry and some humor involved. How hard is it doing that from home?
Well, we've kind of weaved it into the show and made it almost like a funny part of it because, like I always say, Jim's technology sucks that he has, but so there's a delay there, but also there's a delay in Jim's brain that's built in. Right. And here's another funny thing. So we just kind of tease each other about it. The funny thing is at the station when we're all together, Jim will what we call freight train, where he'll just start talking right through you. But for some reason now, if anybody starts to talk, even if I go like that, he'll stop.
Right. Gotcha.
We just joke around about that, and we text each other, and Bob has a middle finger that he texts to Jim every once in a while. So we all get along really well. Jim and I are like old war buddies. I mean,
right.
I told him the other day, I don't think there's anything that you could say to me that would piss me off because we've known each other for so long. And then, having Bob, I really bonded with Bob. You're right. We really miss Danny, and I miss all of the things about him. But Bob and I bonded at the Super Bowl, in Super Bowl 48 in New York, where we went back there and we happened to partner up and just loved it. Bob is one of those guys that will ask you 500 questions before you even ask him one. It's not very often. Usually people want to talk about themselves, right?
Yeah.
And Bob will just dig in like, oh, how old's your daughter? Well, what's she doing? And I mean, he just,
right.
I love that quality about him, and that's what makes him so good. So yeah, it's worked out really well. And once we knew Danny was going to take off, Jim and I both were like, we need Bob. We need Bob Stelton. So we got him, and and it's been great. And we've really been having fun. You talk about working from home. It's just, I didn't realize how much I miss people. The interaction. And I've been around, I've probably 3-4 times, taken the risk of hanging out with, I had my family over one time because my son went to Hawaii for 3 months. So I wanted everybody to meet his girlfriend and everything. And so my whole family came over. And the other time, my wife and I were down in Palm Springs, and she has an 88-year-old aunt. And she wanted to see Shannon. And, and I said, look, make sure, are they okay with this? And they're absolutely, we're okay. And this was 3 weeks ago. We went to dinner, had them over to our house. They've been married for 65 years, her aunt and uncle. And they were like, look, I'll take the risk. I need to see you. When she needed to see her great niece. So, that's those kinds of times in the last 4 months have been really precious. And I don't mean to sound too corny, but like just the times you get together with people. And I thought I would be fine with social distancing. I've always said, I've been social distancing my whole life. My wife has to drag me to parties. She has to drag me to social engagements. But now I realize that, man, I miss being around people.
Yeah, I'm with you. And just back to you mentioned Jim Moore. Sometimes, and last year, obviously, when you guys were in the studio, I get that feeling when I'd get asked a question, from Danny, who was there in 2019, or you, I'd be answering it. I just feel like I just picture in my head Jim sitting in the corner of that studio, just shaking his head, rolling his eyes at my answer. You know what I'm saying? So
No.
now that he's sitting at home, it's like he can't do that. So I feel like there's like a little surge of confidence given that answer, because I'm waiting for his whatever question he's going to throw at me, and he usually tries to rip on my career or whatever it is.
Yeah,
I just find, man, like the thought of, and you said it too. I'm like you. It's. In the past, it was, hey, we're going to go do this or do that. I just don't like, not that I didn't like being around people, but man, it was a bit of a struggle. Once I got there, I was okay. But this whole, what I'm reading now is that, companies are talking about, oh, well, once this COVID-19 goes away, everyone's going to work from home. That's going to be the new trend. And I'm sitting there going, man, that's depressing, right?
Yeah.
It really is. I get it. You want to save money from office space and everything else, but like your show, you couldn't do it from home long term, right? I mean, there's got to be a productivity factor. What do you think? I mean, do you feel like the chemistry is way better when you guys are in person and you can get way more out of it? Do you feel like it's lacking that?
Oh yeah, definitely. And I don't, the only reason I was like, well, there's lots of people that do shows across the country that are usually not in studio, but it certainly helps. And then, some of the things that are said during the breaks and what you talk about and some of the, and a lot of times we'll come back on and we'll be laughing, and it'll be because something that was said during the break, so yeah, I think you need to eventually get back together, and hopefully, that's what we'll learn maybe coming out of this. And again, coming from me, my mom, I was going to wear this t-shirt my mom sent me, and it says, "I'm not angry. This is just my face."
I'm going to post that photo, by the way. Not post it.
Okay.
I'm going to put it on this YouTube version of this podcast. Yeah.
And then the other one she sent me said, "It's too people-y in here," and so and that's kind of how I've always been. But again, like I said, it's just been the moments where I've gotten together with people, and even in a Zoom call like this. I mean, it's usually we're just talking to each other over the radio or on the phone or texting or emailing or whatever. But just to see somebody's face and to be around somebody. I think we're all learning how valuable that is.
Do you guys do the show where you can see each other over like a Zoom or something like that, or no, you can't see each other?
Well, it's kind of a sore subject because I know Bob really wants to do that, and I think Jim has done it. I'm the one who hasn't been good at that because I'm looking at different things on my computer, and the Teams meeting like this would be on my computer, so I think signaling each other and things. I think we need to try that. So I'm going to have to give in and actually do what everybody else wants to do. But that's something that they've done. But we've mostly just texted each other, "Hey, I got another question here," or whatever. So
I do miss the Friday afternoons at Edgar's. Even if I wasn't supposed to go on, and Jessamine would hit me up, "Hey, you want to come down?" I'm like, yeah, for sure. Because it's kind of like for me, anytime I feel like I do a better job when I'm checking in with people. If I'm doing stuff in person, I just feel better about if I'm answering a question or something like that. And then, the humor's easier. Sometimes I'm trying to crack some joke over the phone or, in with you guys. I'm like, I need a laugh here or something. There's a delay and it just doesn't. But doing that kind of helps because I'm supposed to join you guys, 3:30 on a Tuesday. But it just helps to sort of check in, have a conversation in between breaks and everything else. And just kind of have that kind of chemistry. I just the thought, man, of like, and everyone's like, "Oh, this is great. Everyone can work from home." I'm like, there's got to be side effects to that. People need to separate. I'm in a room where I sleep in this room, right? Yeah. So bedroom, I have to have, this is my place to sleep, and this is my place to go work, and this is my place to, it's just doing them all at the same spot is just depressing. And I just hope this isn't like the trend 10 years from now. You have to sit with 3 monitors around you and no one leaves their room. Do my head in. You know what I mean?
Well, totally. And that's the same thing I do. Usually I do my my show up in my bedroom. So, I mean, I could literally every day sleep until 1 in my bed, walk over, start doing research for the show, and travel like 10 feet. And then theoretically go right back to bed. But yeah, it's I think that's one of the things that we're figuring out with some of the side effects of the lockdown. I mean, the coronavirus itself is scary, but there's a lot of statistics out there that are not only disturbing, but some of them are disgusting. And, we're talking about Suicide hotlines for teenagers calls up 300 to 900%. Child abuse. Visits to emergency rooms for child abuse is up 35%, not to mention poverty, overdoses, suicides, crime. I mean, there's all kinds of other side effects sociologically that are going along with this. Now, look, everybody, look, we have to be safe about this thing, but I just think, maybe 2-3 years from now, we're going to look back and look at what was worse, the coronavirus itself or the side effects from the lockdown. And I'm not talking about being irresponsible and going out and not wearing, I'm not a rebel that's going to go out without my mask on or anything like that. But I just think, here's the thing, when you bring that up, people get mad. And what I like to say is we can hold more than one thought in our head at the same time, right?
Yeah.
I mean, nobody wants anyone to die from the coronavirus, but we can also consider these other things too. And it's not taking anything away from our attention to the coronavirus.
Yeah.
It's not taking anything. There's not like this bank of sympathy that we're withdrawing from by mentioning these other things. And I'll just like mental health, and, and everybody will probably laugh at this. My wife just loves tennis. She loves playing, and her whole thing got canceled until next February.
Yeah.
I mean, those kinds of things have effects on people, and that's probably the least of our worries, but still, mental health, all kinds of things that go along with that. That doesn't mean that I'm, anti-lockdown and that I'm going to go out and be this rebel and some crazy hillbilly that doesn't wear his, mask and spreads it and everything. It's just that it's something I think we should consider. And like for us, Ryan, I mean, you mentioned not leaving your house, but also we need sports, right? I mean, sports
100%, man. You make a great point. I feel like, and that this is nothing to the fact that I'm Australian, so I don't want to sit here and start passing judgment on the US, but in this country, there's no gray area or there's no in between. Like you said it, if you come out and say, hey, look, mental health's a big thing, you have to make sure that this gets some play. Child abuse or all these little things, depression, isolation, all these little factors that come into, as well as the fact that, I get it, man. And I'll wear a mask and no problem and everything else. Sure. And COVID, it's a serious thing and everything else. But these other things, like you said, get no play. But the thing is, if you come out and publicly say that, all of a sudden, like you said, it's like you're being completely, like you said, like a rebel. And, it's amazing. It's one of these, and you said, I think years from now, you look back and hopefully, unless this thing's bigger than what we know it is, but these things are going to make a way bigger impact. And you said about the tennis too. And if I came out and said, so I just started boxing again. I used to box when I was a kid. Emerald City Boxing up the road. It's been great. So I've been going in at 8:00. You have to wear a mask. You have to, and they're really good about keeping everyone distant. But I just need that release, man. I need to, whether it's just punching something or a workout, I need that release because my head, I'm going sideways here. And the other fact you just mentioned at the end is sports, man. I am, we're supposed to start up next Friday. And I'm like, I want to get to the field. I want to get amongst something I've been around my whole life. It's crazy what it does to your head. It's nuts.
Right. Well, and the thing I worry about with sports, Ryan, in this country, I mean, I was talking to Michael Bumpus about this, about some of the things that are going on around the world. Like around the world, they're opening schools. And without hesitation. Yeah. And he said, we do things differently here. But, I mean, it's kind of a panicky country right now. And so, there's different things that are going on here. There's lots of fear and rightfully so. But, it's just there's not much rational thought right now. But like you said, people will, I sent you a guy. Here's a guy that I follow. His name is Dr. Scott Atlas.
Right.
And the reason why I follow him, because somebody, I quoted some of his statistics and things that he's saying. And somebody, was texting, oh, did you get this guy from Fox News or where'd you find this guy? Right. I'm like, well, he's a senior fellow at the Hoover Institute, which is one of the brightest think tanks in the world. He also teaches medicine at Stanford University at their medical school. So, and he has a totally different view. I saw him this morning, I think, or yesterday, and Nancy Pelosi was standing there, a politician, saying, we can't open the schools, it's going to spread. And then he is saying the exact opposite of that.
Yeah.
And, he's quoting like countries all over the world. So, look, it just depends on how much risk you want to take. I mean, I'm sure there'll be something that happens when you open up, but weighing that versus locking down children and all the side effects that go along with that, not to mention, kids just learning how to interact with other kids.
Yeah.
But then also a lot of people who are experiencing poverty, they don't have 2 laptops at home. And
Right.
a lot of them aren't
Yeah.
logging into the, to some of the websites. Look, I got grown kids, but I love children and I care about it. And I think, schools are an essential business.
Yeah.
And in the last time I checked, it's for the children.
Right.
It's not for the teachers. The
Well,
teachers.
here's the argument. It's like, oh yeah, but what about the teachers? They're going to get sick because
Right.
You mentioned, Dr. Atlas, and first of all, one of the things that's crazy: 0 to 19, 0% fatalities.
Right.
And then now they're starting to figure out, which again doesn't get much play because it's not something that's going to get your rating spike. But the fact that the transmission from kids into adults really is slim to none, right?
That's what they're finding around the world.
Yeah.
Actually. Yeah. And he likes to quote JAMA Pediatrics, which is kind of a pediatric health website, similar to like a CDC type of thing, that, supports that. So yeah, see, and that's what I worry about, like with opening up sports. So Jim and I had this conversation the other day, and look, I respect Jim's, and he might be right, but he said even if let's say we open up college football,
mm-hmm.
even if one college football player dies from the coronavirus, it's one too many, and that we should lock it down.
Yeah.
And that's a tough question because somebody texted in and go, well, what if it was your son? And my response was, well, since we seem to know the future here, I would tell him don't play. But I mean, yeah, it's an interesting argument though.
Yeah.
And, and I came back with, okay, so if you knew 10 people were going to die over the next 10 years in college football from coronavirus, would you just shut down college football? So, I mean, and look, these are some tough questions. Do I have all the answers? I don't. If somebody had all the answers, we would be out of this thing.
Right.
But it's just interesting how people feel about that because, you're going to have to face some hard facts at some point of, what is an appropriate amount of risk to take with this thing. And right now it seems like people's tolerance for risk with the coronavirus is 0. But their risk, their tolerance for risk in other things that affect it, a little bit higher. So yeah, it's a really weird time that we're in. And again, I'm just saying what I believe. That doesn't mean I'm a bad person, okay? Because a lot of people will, like, if they disagree with you, they just attack you. And I don't know if that's because of the lockdown or just because of the culture on Twitter and everything. I just found out about cancel culture, Ryan, and I think I explained it to you. But
right before we got on, and which I'm glad you brought up because again, like the whole thing, like Drew Brees made a comment, and then there was this cancel Drew Brees, and I asked you, I was like, hey, is this a new? Like, I don't know anything about the NFL.
Yeah.
I'm like, is this a new term in the NFL? Like, explain what the cancel culture is.
Yeah, well, I had it explained to by my daughter, and I guess it's just where everybody gets together and decides to. It's kind of to me, I mean, it's almost like an extreme form of bullying, right? You're trying to intimidate somebody out of their viewpoint, and if not that, out of their job possibly. So yeah, and everybody is kind of feeling like, wow, I have to be really careful of not only what I say, but what I believe. And that's the one thing that really bothers me, and I used to worry a lot about, that I would say something stupid that would get me fired or whatever. But, now all of a sudden I feel like for a lot of people, it's becoming, I'm more fearful of what I believe. And that's when, where people are coming after. And I think it's really more of a sociological phenomenon because of the lockdown. And we're really only seeing each other. I compared it to this, Ryan. If you're in traffic and you're in a car and somebody cuts you off, you're way more likely to flip them off or scream and yell and honk than if you are in line at Safeway, where you don't have this barrier of a car, and there's something about people's attitudes change, and if somebody rams their cart into you, you're not going to scream at them and don't have a horn to honk and flip them off. But
are you saying because the car is basically like your shield? In other words,
exactly.
in other words, on Twitter, for example, or Instagram, whatever it is, whatever the latest is with
not in person
with kids. Yeah, not in 1000%. I see that all the time.
Right.
I've got two examples of that. And first of all, you mentioned this cancel culture where it's like a mob mentality. Where the thing is with Twitter, and this is what I find, you might have a big opinion, or you might agree with if someone makes a comment and you're like, oh, cancel that person. If I'm using that term correctly,
right.
You read something, it costs nothing and zero effort to retweet that or write a little 2-sentence. But like you said, if you're at Safeway and someone comes bellowing out saying, hey, cancel that person, you're not going to go stand behind him and do the same thing because the effort and the confrontation is completely different, right?
Right. Yeah, and I think it has a lot to do with Bob Stelton calls them keyboard heroes or keyboard warriors or something. They're real tough behind their so I mean, I think we've got that like on blast now because everybody's at home and everybody wants to have a voice, and it's giving a voice to people that you wouldn't normally give a voice to. And
with that too, people are addicted to attention. Right.
Yeah.
I noticed that if someone who I know has a blog or something like that, and they write something, they throw it out there, boom, all of a sudden it gets some reaction. Well, then all of a sudden there's that addiction factor. And that's what, I mean, Twitter and Instagram are built. There's an office building full of people creating this thing to get you hooked, to get you in zombie mode and keep scrolling through that. And all of a sudden you get a bunch of likes. And you see that with kids all the time too. They'll delete photos or delete their whatever if they don't get enough likes because it's an addiction mentality. And you said it's giving, and I got no problem to giving voice to everyone. That's fine.
Sure.
But let's all admit that there is that addiction factor when all of a sudden you get some hits, some retweet, whatever you want, retweets, likes or comments. Boom, you're going to be more inclined to keep throwing these opinions out regardless of how you feel, because more so because the attention factor as opposed to how you really feel about something.
Yeah. Well, and since we've started doing radio, one of the things I've sent out to the texters and things like that is, I always say, please don't assume the worst in people.
Right.
That's a really, and to me, it's a 90-10, 90% of people are good. 10%, maybe not so good. So, but just don't start off with the assumption. Like if I say something that you disagree with, don't start off with the assumption that I'm evil and bad and dumb and all this. Just maybe listen a little bit. So, and I think, and that goes both ways, certainly. Anybody that says anything to me, and, I had the benefit of, I got a scholarship to Stanford, and it was one of the best experiences I ever had. But I always say the best thing about that place is that I left Stanford with way more questions than answers, way more questions. And it taught me how to think that way. And I'm going to have my opinion, and people might disagree with it. But, I always feel like, hey, no matter what, you should always give any opposing thought at least some credit and some attention,
Do you feel like you have a little bit more of a respect if you are giving your opinion, whether it's on football or a social issue? Because look, Stanford, man, I grew up in Australia. I knew what Stanford was when I was 13 years old. I didn't quite know until we got our first baseball player in there, the process, how to get into that school, not on the field, off the field. Do you feel like you have the fact that you went to Stanford, it's a extremely high academic school, that you have some sort of respect factor or a pedigree behind a comment as opposed to someone else?
Well, if somebody wants to...
And where I'm getting with that, sometimes I'll make a comment. Everyone's like, dude, you didn't even go to college. Shut up. It's like, that's where I'm getting at.
Hey, well, one of the smartest people I know and is my wife, Shannon, and she went to the School of Hard Knocks.
Yeah, right.
And she started her own business. She, and thankfully we don't have a small business anymore, because that's the thing, if I was to support anything, small businesses are the lifeblood of this country. And a lot of them, I have so much sympathy for people doing that. But no, she's one of the smartest people I've ever met. And like I said, she went to Edmonds Community College for a while, but she's the genius in our household, I would say. But and here's, I'll tell you, the Stanford thing, this is something my mom, like your mom, my mom always says, David, she calls me David, stop saying that. Stop selling yourself short, because I always go, yeah, I went to Stanford, but I got in because I was a really good football player. Okay.
but there still had to be, they couldn't just, okay, 'cause this was back, 1983? I think you...
Yeah, 82. 82 was my first year. Yeah.
By the way, my father-in-law is a huge Broncos fan. I need to ask you a couple questions in a second,
okay.
right? Because I'll just straight up forget it. But back then too, and even now and whatever, there was still that element. I mean, you must have been really academic in high school, right?
Yeah, it's funny. My 8th grade, at the end of my 8th grade, I was valedictorian. Right. And then in 9th grade, I found football. And so that became my love. And so, it was the first time I got a chance to play tackle football was, my freshman year at Wooster High School in Reno, Nevada. We were state champions in 1981. Anybody that listens to the show knows that. I brag about it any chance I get. But yeah, then I got A's, and I think in my class I was like top 20 or top 30. So I went from valedictorian to like in the, A range, whatever. But, football was my love. And like I said, at Stanford, I mean, I was an All-American football player. I was an All-American National Strength Coaches Association All-American. So, I mean, obviously I was putting a lot of time into football, a lot of time into weightlifting and things like that. And then had maybe one of the worst knee injuries in college football history. Total dislocation in 1984, and was told I would never play again. So it put a lot of time in.
But you came back and just didn't you lead what you led? I mean, I was just reading this morning in tackles, right? Was it Pac-10? It was Pac-10 back then, right?
Yeah.
Did you lead the Pac-10 in tackles, or which one was it? It was something. It was something, because I read that, I was like, hold on, knee injury, and I go back and obviously from being an athlete. You go back 80s, right? So I put this together, 80s, knee injury. Usually it's something that's like you won't play football. You get told you won't play again. Right. And then you went from that to killing it the next year, and then getting, second round draft pick into the NFL. So it's man, whoever did your surgery is a stud.
Well, and it was a guy who was a Rose Bowl MVP for Stanford. He was a quarterback, Dr. Don Bunce. May he rest in peace. Another guy named Dr. Bailing. But yeah, I was at Stanford. I mean, I had the worst knee injury. It was in Arizona, so I had to fly home, and they put me in a stretcher and everything. And on the plane, they had to put seats down and, strap me in. And it was a big deal, because I didn't have a pulse in my leg for about 30 minutes. And they kept checking it, because that's what happens if you sever the nerve or the artery. Yeah. It could lead to an amputation. And there's been some college football players who have had that. But the doctor, after a while, he kept checking these points. And I guess he finally got a pulse after 30 minutes. And he goes, okay, you're going to be okay. And I looked at him, never having had a knee injury before. I said, does that mean I can play next week?
No.
He looks at me and he's like, no, that does not what that means. So I found out later that I was in jeopardy for about 30 minutes of losing my leg. So, it was a huge deal. And back then, like you said, the technology wasn't quite there, but I was at Stanford and I worked my tail off to get back. But my senior year, I think it was all Pac-10. And, I don't know if I led the conference in tackles or what, but yeah, I worked my way back, and then I got drafted in the second round. And there were a lot of teams in the NFL that were just not going to draft me. Right. And the reason why is because they saw the film. And the film, which I made myself go back and watch, but it's one of those really ugly injuries that you want to look away from. Yeah. So, so the Seahawks kind of took a chance on me. And then,
was that the culture, and is that still the culture, man? I mean, and by the way, one thing I say every offseason, once this offseason rolls around, I say to my wife every year, I'm like, I need to learn football. And it's not, I tell other people that, they're like, oh, well, there's 4 downs. And there's no. I understand the game. And I think I've texted you a couple times. And I said, hey, man, I need to sit down and watch football with you, because, if I listen to it on the radio, I'm like, oh, man, locked in. Like, everything you're saying is like, oh, that's I'm learning. I'm learning something. And I think even Mike Salk, when he said, hey, if you want to host more radio, like daytime radio shows, you got to learn football, right? Obviously in Seattle. Yeah. But do you
anytime, brother?
Yeah,
anytime.
I need to
you
take
bring
it.
over a half rack and we'll get it done, man.
Yeah, let's do it for sure. Do you feel like that was in back in the 80s, and the culture was, you just said that you just blew up your knee, didn't even have a pulse, and you're like, oh, can I play next week? Do you have to have that back in that culture, in that era of football? Do you feel like it's changed, or that's the same? Would you still have a linebacker get on the plane, the same injury in 2020 and say the same thing? Can I play next week?
It's a good question.
And not to throw anyone under the bus, because I know
no.
obviously you got to.
How much money have they made would be my question.
Right, gotcha.
Do they have 10 million in the bank? Do they have 20 million in the bank? So that
what about a college kid then? Pac-12 kid, yeah.
It depends. And I'll give you one good example. One of my favorite players on the Seahawks team is Trey Flowers. And he's a lanky corner who was a safety. Mm-hmm. And right now everybody's thinking that he didn't have a great year, although he had, I think, 2 or 3 interceptions and a couple sacks, but he had a lot of penalties, things like that. That guy is a throwback. He is one of those guys that will go into the trainer and say, hey, can I get shot up in my shoulder so I can play? That's the kind of guy that he is. And the Seahawks have a tendency to find those. So to answer your question, yes, there are those guys. Yeah. Absolutely, there are. But I think, the older you get and the more money you have, the less risk you want to take, certainly.
Gotcha.
So, but yeah, there are still some of those guys, Ryan. And it's a great question you ask, because you're probably like me. You would do anything to play, and so there are those guys out there right now. So, and I think the Seahawks do a really good job of getting them, like Earl Thomas. And Earl is always a little bit eccentric, but he would always say, I'm married to football. Football's my wife, and so, there are still those kinds of guys.
And I asked that, my dad was heavily involved. He was a strength coach for professional rugby teams. By the way, you haven't even noticed this, man. I got my Wallabies jersey on. If you're not watching this, go check it out. Yeah.
Looks like a NASCAR car or something. All the different advertisements on it.
Well, that's Australia. It's just flat out yellow pages on the jersey, advertising and everything else. Which, by the way, I love in the States that baseball, they might be switching that. I know the NBA started to trickle in a couple of advertising, but my dad says that all the time. He's like, oh, rugby players now, rugby league players are soft compared to back in the day. He said back in the 80s, they used to have guys, they'd make them run with bricks in their hands, and then they have to stop at these checkpoints and do like shoulder press and everything. He said now it's like they're all got the heart rate monitors on, everything's monitored, and if they go a little too hard, they got to stop. He's like, it's just soft, it's just a different mentality. That's why I need to ask you. But again, you're working with a team, so I don't want to be like, you'd be like, oh yeah, they're soft, and then people.
There's a good amount of guys, and honestly, one of the maybe the stupidest things I've ever done, but it was something that I needed to do down in Scottsdale. There's a mountain, Camelback Mountain, and it was a 1 mile jog from my house. Now I didn't jog over, I drove over, but it's about a 50-minute climb to the top and back, and I did it in the middle of the day, and it was 120 degrees out, and I didn't take any water. And so, because I figured, hey, look, man, I'm not gonna die of thirst in 40 minutes. So I went up and I came back down. And the reason why I did it, like physiologically, that made no sense. It was stupid, right? Why would you not have water? And I had people that were coming down off the mountain, and I was the only one on the top because it was so hot. But they were like, hey, where's your water? Hey, and I'm like, yeah, I'm good, man, thanks. But I just needed to prove that to myself mentally. Gotcha. Yeah. So I mean, there. I think that there are guys that still kind of do that, but you're right about what your dad said. I mean, some of those things maybe didn't make sense carrying bricks around, but I mean, mentally, that's something that you need. Like that's something I put in my back pocket, knowing that I did that when I was really tired in the fourth quarter, I may not, consciously think about it, but I know that I did that. And that was something that, that I needed to do, even if it didn't make sense.
Yeah. And same thing, man. 2010, I was terrible and with the Mariners, and it was all in my head. And so that off season, I went and started.
You were terrible, but you were with the Mariners. I mean, come on. How terrible were you? You made a pro baseball team.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you know what's funny about that? And I've spoke to, like Matt Boyd with the Tigers and Charlie Furbush recently. And we talked about just being present. Like there was times I was in the big leagues. And 2010, I'm in the big leagues and I'm just miserable. And I look back now, I'm like, how the hell did I ever take that time for granted? I'm playing Major League Baseball. What am I doing? Wasting my time just but it was this thing where I was like, I just can't wait for the off season. I need to get out of here. I got soft mentally. So that off season, I started doing MMA training, not because it made no sense for baseball, to be honest. And I tried to justify that, and rationalize that this is, but it was just for my head. I just needed to do something that took me out of my comfort zone. I just feel like, and again, not, you just hear these stories of the 80s and 90s. You talked about your knee injury. James Clifford, who's a strength coach of the Mariners.
Oh, yeah. He had that linebacker at Washington, by the way.
Right. He had that knee injury, and that was it, man. I mean, and he talked about
linebacker. Yeah.
Yeah, he talked about that day and age. It was so touch and go, but he wanted to get back on the field so hard, like so fast. You know what I mean? So, again, and I'm not, today's athlete, everything's different. I mean, everything's completely different. Everyone's, feelings get hurt a lot easier and everything else. That's for sure. Hey, speaking of, and I wanted to ask you this, and if my father-in-law will kill me if I forget. Now, he's a huge Broncos fan, so he was excited. I know he's listening to this. You wore number 57, right? I got to make sure I got the Tom Jackson.
Oh yeah,
wore that. What was the reason behind wearing 57?
Was your father-in-law mad at me? Because a lot of people were mad at me for wearing Tom Jackson's number.
Well, no, he wore Tom Jackson, the greatest linebacker of all time. His jersey, it's a great number. He wasn't mad at you whatsoever. Yeah. What was the reason behind it? It had nothing to do with him, I take it. But people were mad at you for wearing that number?
Well, no, I didn't choose it.
Okay.
I got there. I've been number 92 since college. They gave me 92 when I went to Stanford, and I was like 92. And there was a guy there named Jeff Seaman that was it was Erie. We had kind of a strange same path, but he's a pastor now. And but he was a really good linebacker at Stanford, and that's why they gave me 92. So I wore 92 in with the Seahawks. And then when I signed my free agent contract, I got there and there was a guy who had 92. Yeah. So I was like, all right, I'll take 57. I like the odd numbers, and I thought it was cool. And I probably had my best year in the NFL wearing that number. But
was there any reservation that you were taking someone's number who was a legend there at all?
No, I didn't really think about that. And somebody said it in the paper one time, but it wasn't like that big of a deal back then. Like now it's a huge deal. If, everybody was mad that Marshawn Lynch's number was given away. And I'm like, come on, man. Yeah. It's just a number. But but I'll tell you a funny story is I went back to 92 because I liked 57 and I had a really good year. And so the next year, the day that my son was born, it was 92 degrees in Scottsdale. And and the hospital where he was born was on 92nd Street. And then my son weighed 9 pounds, 2 ounces.
No way.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, I'm going back to 92.
That's
and then
amazing.
did nothing but have surgeries after that. So I probably should have
blame your son.
But yeah, exactly. It's his fault. No.
Yeah, you resent. You haven't spoken to your son in years after that. that's fine. Hey, speaking of that, obviously you finished your career with the Broncos. You had a good fight, because I like to see transition out of careers. Everyone's like, oh, you played football or you played baseball. Oh, life's just roses. The credits roll up and the movie's over and boom, you're good to go. You can just go play golf every day. But you had a good 5 years there. You weren't around the game. Was it leaving football? First of all, what made you was it an injury? Was it that last year when it's like, all right, this is time? Were you trying to get back in the game, or were you like, nah, I'm okay?
I tried to get back in for 2 years. I actually had a workout in Green Bay in 97. So my last year playing was 95. But I don't want to be too dramatic, but I would wake up, for like 2-3 years after my career, because I wanted to keep playing. And I would have these dreams where a team calls me and it's the playoffs and their linebacker got hurt. And then how dreams are. It was like, oh, I couldn't get there because I didn't have my socks or some stupid thing like that, But, I had dreams like that for years after, and I would wake up with like the most empty feeling. And I don't want to be too dramatic, but it was kind of like, when the first football season started without me in 96, it was kind of like standing on a dock, watching all of your friends and family and loved ones sail off in a ship away from you, and you're left behind. It just almost feel like the football can't go on without me. Yeah. I've been doing this for 18 years for me, including high school. So Yeah, it was really tough, and it's a tough one to leave. I think one of the reasons too is that you can't really simulate anything. I mean, you can go throw a football around, but that's not what I did, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Basketball players can still go play in pickup games or play horse or whatever. I suppose baseball, you can go and play softball. I mean, there's not really any football leagues or anything for people that still want to play. I suppose I could have done that, but I would have been dumb considering all the injuries. But I feel like it's something that you can't, what I did was like, what could I do to simulate that? Maybe go run into parked cars or something.
Well, we've got, matter of fact, we've got some callers calling in right now. We're going to set up a couple Seahawk fans. They want to line up, and you just basically take them out down at the local park.
There you go. That might.
You're right, though. That's a good point, man. I mean, when you think about it, there's not really anything. You can just go set up tackle bags in the backyard and just rip in.
Right.
So okay. How old were your kids at that point when you had when that that ship left the dock and you were standing there at the start of the season, 95? How old were your kids at that point? I'm trying to do the math.
They were like 2 and 4, so they were born in 94 and 96. So my wife actually brought my infant son to a game one time in 95, but he didn't really have any recollection of that. And now mostly my kids just make fun of me for like all the old hokey football cards and stuff like that. Right. They always write little notes on there and give me a hard time, and I'm just dad, and that to me is very cool. But I kind of wish that they could have seen me play, but I don't think that they don't. My son was the only one, and he probably didn't have much of a recollection of that.
My 2017, I played in the World Baseball Classic for Australia, and I was like, I want to play to make sure Kennedy can witness me play, and hopefully it gets etched. She won't remember, but hopefully it gets etched in stone somewhere down there. Because I don't want to just keep telling, oh, hey, Dad played baseball, or whatever. She's like, yeah, they're great, whatever. Because like I get jealous of some of these dudes whose kids, they're 6, 7, they got the jersey, they got the glove on in the stands, and they're watching Dad play. It's like, oh man, I missed that boat. But and my mom's like, she's not going to remember this, because I was like, oh, Kennedy's watching me play. But even just back to you, so 95, there must have been those periods that you said, first of all, you were waking up, having these weird dreams. There must have been not this depression, but this unknown. You had no idea basically you had options. I mean, you're graduating from Stanford. So there's things you could have done, but you said nothing really emulates the feeling of playing football. Yeah. There must have been that fear of the unknown or a little bit of depression there going on that, plus you got a 4 and a 2-year-old, 2 kids in the house, spend way more time at home when it's the middle of football season, all these little things, and not to keep bringing up all these, but there must have been those times there where you're like, what do I do now? Who am I? What's my identity? Yeah, right?
Absolutely. And then there was a period, it was kind of like going through the stages of grievance or whatever, but eventually I got mad at football and I ignored it. See how they do without me. They did just fine without me. Yeah. But that's kind of how you feel. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to do something that's entirely opposite. Nothing that has anything to do with football. I'm never going to coach again. I'm never going to watch games. I'm not going to do anything. So I went and got my Series 7 and became a financial advisor at Merrill Lynch. And I did that for like 6 years, and then ended up just hating it. But
was there any moment during that where you're like, oh, this is very fulfilling, or it just didn't check the box at all?
No, I like telling the story. One time when I was like in my first year, so I was basically like trying to study for the test to get the license so I could buy and sell stocks and things like that. And I was down in Scottsdale, so nobody really knew who I was. And then the other thing is, people have always underestimated how big or how much I weigh or whatever. Right. I just told the other day on the air, I fooled one of those carnival guys I beat him by like 25 pounds. Right. I was like 250 and he thought I was 220. So I didn't look like a football player, in other words. Gotcha. So, and I'm walking around the office and they're just looking at, okay, here's a 33-year-old rookie here. So at one point, one of the secretaries down there at Merrill Lynch, she points to me and she goes, excuse me, what are you doing? And I said, I'm just going back to my desk to study. And she's like, I need you to cover my phones. I'm like, okay. So, I'm sitting there at the front desk saying, thanks for calling Merrill Lynch. How can I direct your call? And figuring out how to do that. This is like 3 years after like I got a sack on a Monday Night Football game, and I like floated off the field, and I'm like, look at me now, 3 years later,
Right.
I'm answering phones like an intern. So, I mean, it was one of those kind of, I think it was necessary. I mean, I was glad that happened, because you just realize, well, once it's over, it's nobody really is. And now, when people come up and actually, say, hey, I remember when you played, I'm like, really? Wow, you must have a really good memory, because that was like a whole lifetime ago. So
do you feel like too, and I listen to you on the radio, do you feel like you have to sort of sharpen that sort of remembering what it was like to be a linebacker if you were doing an analyst,
yes.
because it's like, oh man, I get so far removed. I find that if I'm coaching a kid, that just brings me back to like just the science of pitching, for example. If I don't have that for a few months, I'm like, you kind of just forget. It's like, oh, he needs to keep his front shoulder closed or something. Like, what am I saying right now? So do you feel like there has to be something there to sharpen that sword to sort of to remember the game? Because it has been a while since you played.
Yeah, well, I try to watch as much film, and and I'm surrounded with a bunch of really good football people. I talk to Ray Roberts, I talk to Paul Moyer, probably one of the best, and and we just kind of go through and look at plays and things like that. So yeah, and it's not entirely different. Like a lot of times people go, oh yeah, look at this concept. What was the quarterback running? What did they call that? The Wildcat. I'm like, that's the single wing from Worcester High School in 1979. I mean, I used to run that offense. So a lot of the stuff repeats itself, and everybody likes to talk about the fancy new plays in science. And I'm like, yeah, I've seen that before. But, as far as being an analyst, Ryan, here's the one thing I will never do. And I got this from Carl Mecklenburg, which your father-in-law liked this. He was a linebacker for at Denver when I was out there. And I think he's a Hall of Famer. Mm-hmm. But whenever he would hear an ex-player kind of criticize too harshly another player, he would say, that guy got the player lobotomy. And I've always sworn I will never get the player lobotomy. I'm never going to forget. I always take the side of the players. And a lot of times when people go, that guy's terrible, look at that play he made, I'm like, do you know how hard that is?
Yeah.
And like Chuck Knox used to say, that guy gets paid too. So that's one thing I've tried to, I'm always going to side with the players. Mm-hmm. Not always, but I mean, for the most part, that's where I'm going to start, because, and I'll never forget that, because how hard it is, and Chuck Knox used to always say, hey, if it was easy, everybody would do it. And actually he used to say, if this was easy, there'd be so many suckers parked in the parking lot at the Kingdome, you wouldn't be able to find a spot. That's what Chuck Knox used to say. So yeah, I mean, it's I don't ever want to forget that, and I think that helps in the analysis, to look at it from the player's perspective, how difficult it is.
You ever worry though too, and I had to ask some people how to go about this right way if you do want to be critical of a player, because you travel with the team, right?
Yeah. Like
last year you were traveling with the team. So you got to get on the plane back and forth, and they check their Twitter or they check some soundbite and stuff like that. Yeah. You don't ever want to get caught, because you still have to maintain that relationship to be able to ask them questions and everything else. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, no, it's true. And, I think I'm trying to walk that line, but I just don't think any player ever wants to do that. So a lot of times I'll say, hey man, that guy will tell you first before anybody else that he should have made that play. Yeah. But then a lot of times, like I said, I'll look at what the other guy do. Well, that was maybe one of the best moves I've ever seen. Super Bowl 49, when I don't say Russell threw an interception on the 1 yard line, I say Malcolm Butler made maybe the best, most impossible play I've ever seen.
Right.
And because he didn't even react. He didn't bounce off of Ricardo Lockett. He just made an incredible play. And so what I try to do is look at that from that standpoint. If a guy gets beat, just and especially on the broadcast, of course, because look, it's it's the team broadcast, so we're not gonna. But I've gotten to know these guys, and I care about them, and so when you look at it from that standpoint, it's more like, hey, this guy, his opponent there made a really good play, or you just try to say, hey man, he's got to try to do better than that. So and that's not that's not going too far, but yeah, I will never criticize too harshly players, just because, and maybe that's not great for our talk show, but it's really how I feel. It's really, I feel like I know how hard it is. And again, not having taken the player lobotomy, I'll always feel that way. I know how difficult it is for these guys.
CJ Nikowski, he's the color analyst for the Texas Rangers, and I've always bounced questions off him. But he said to me, I said, "Hey man, how do you cover a team that's like in a rebuilding? So you're going to have a bunch of young players or guys who aren't doing well, or like Felix, for example. Everyone knows that Felix wasn't like at his peak, his prime, the last couple of years he was with the Mariners." He said, "Dude, just say like this. Just say, if someone messes up a young player," he made a really good point. I've used it a bunch. So if you listen to this, if you've heard me say it, this is where it comes from. He said, like JP Crawford would be the first to tell you that he made that. You know what I'm saying? And that just makes it puts them in basically. Oh, they would have said that too. So speaking of getting back in, so you basically said screw football. The ship had left the dock that last year, that opening day. And I've been there too, man. I remember I was with the Astros, like a DFA, and I saw everyone in their suits going off to opening day in Philadelphia. And the bus, I'm on the phone, like telling someone, hey, my agent or whatever, I see this bus roll past me. I'm like, oh, see you guys. I'm outside of the stadium down there in Houston. It was the most lonely, just empty feeling watching that. Yeah. So you go, 5 years or so, what got you back in, what got you into broadcasting? Did you reach out to someone or did someone contact you? Because I mean, when you sort of separate, you don't want to have too many years in between not playing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And, well, I'll tell you what, Dave Pearson, who's the vice president for the Seahawks, I've known since 1989. He was an intern when I was playing, and we all really liked him because he was a smartass and he's really funny and one of the funnier people I know. But he's one of the guys that contacted me. And then Paul Moyer and Dory Monson, they called me one time for a pregame show and then started having me on more regularly. And then in 2004, like I said, Dave Pearson asked me to do the pre and postgame radio shows, and I loved it. And I realized, at that point, enough time had passed that I love football and this is a great way to be around it. And, I'm pretty good at describing things and I remember things, and use a lot of stories. A lot of people that listen to my show are tired of my stories, like the 1981 Worcester High School state football champions. But yeah, I mean, I think it suited me and it was a way to be around. And you probably found this too, Ryan, that after the sting goes away, that you feel like it's a good way I like explaining it to people. And I'll tell you one thing that I try to always do. I don't like the analysts that use the fancy lingo, I always make fun of this. Oh, it's single high safety. I'm like, well, what does that mean? Is it cover 3? Is it cover 1? Because those things can be explained very easily. Cover 3 is you have 3 defenders covering the deep part of the field and everybody else is dropping underneath. I mean, you can do the numbers.
I'm writing this down. So
we'll get to that when you bring that half rack over.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
But I mean, it's not rocket science, and so I've always tried to, keep it simple and try to explain, because what you want to do as an analyst, you want to bring the game to people. You want and that's the best way to get more fans is, a lot of people will shut it out because, it's too confusing. But, I've done a thing for the Seahawks for a breast cancer awareness thing that they've had where there's a room full of 150 women and I've gotten up and done and here's what I always say, women listen. They actually listen. Guys will go, oh, I already know that.
Gotcha.
Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, it's been really fun for me to do that. And so that's kind of how I approach it is like, you want to bring the game to people. You don't want to talk over their heads. You don't want to use some kind of fancy lingo. Whenever somebody uses something like that, I always go, what's that mean? Or why don't you explain to everybody what that means? Because, sometimes people use it as a weapon to look how smart I am. Yeah. And I oppose that. I really, it's one of my pet peeves. It really is. So, I just think if you really know something well, then you should be able to explain it. So that's kind of how I approach the broadcasting part of it.
What, were you still doing the financial stuff when you slowly, seeped into broadcasting, or did you just I'm done with this, I'm going full steam ahead? Because I mean, it's financially, it's, obviously you're probably making some headway, income wise with the financial stuff, because I know for me, man, like everyone just assumes that the Mariners contact me. Oh, you done playing? I'll come up. No, I had to like grind my way out to try and get on TV, and they're like, sorry, we're all full. I'm like, just give me, and literally my boss at Root Sports said, oh, you living in Los Angeles? Can you get down to San Diego? You can jump on for 20 minutes. And then I had just boom, try and snowball from that. But I had to, it wasn't this big financial thing where I was like, oh, here you go.
You start off working for free and working for peanuts is how you do it, right?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, before I let you go, I got to ask you this, because I know some of my Aussie friends who they watch the NFL. By the way, it's called gridiron back in Australia. It used to be. I feel like such an idiot saying this, but your wife, right? She was a cheerleader, right?
Yep.
So I picture this, and a buddy of mine, because he knows who you are, and I said, oh yeah, by the way, like we're going through your bio. He goes, oh dude, ask him about how he met his wife, because I'm picturing like it's a Tuesday. You've got like the midriff, like the training, the practice jersey on with the giant pads. And she's doing a thing over here. You got the hair slicked, out the helmet off. How do you guys meet? You and your wife?
Oh, this is a tragic story. I always, like, the second I saw her when I came to Seattle, I was like, wow, that But I was not what you would call a playa. Okay, Brian, I was terrible. I could not talk to women, and said some of the stupidest things ever. And this is an old story, but I'll tell it anyway. We ended up doing an appearance together one time. So sometimes, they'd get a couple Seahawk players to go to a car dealership. Yeah. And then, a couple Seagals would be there. Gotcha. And so I was there one time with her, and I was trying to talk to her, and I didn't know what to say. I was trying to think of things. And so I asked her about cheering.
But what was their rule? Like, you're not supposed to, like,
supposedly.
Yeah, right.
It was frowned upon that you weren't supposed to interact with although my coach, Rusty Tillman, married a Seagal. Paul Moyer, who we're still best of friends with, Heather and Paul Moyer. Heather was a cheerleader. Right. And actually they helped set me up with Shannon. But before that happened, here's the most awkward thing ever. And I don't know about you, Ryan. It's probably a lot easier for you to get girlfriends than me. But
I'm super awkward, dude.
One of the things that I was asking her about, I was trying to ask her like questions like, okay, well, I here's the thing, and your wife hopefully found that charming, but that's what my wife found it very charming. So,
hey, Dave, real quick, that just cut out. Can you just go? I can't believe it. On the peak of that story. Just go back to after you. That just literally froze up. You just go back to after you said, oh, hey Ryan, you can probably get girls, and I'll just edit it. That's easy. Yeah. Sorry about that.
Okay. But yeah, for me, I was just looking for things to talk about with my wife. And so I honestly, this is what came out of my mouth. So, I was talking to her and I said, oh, so what do you guys do after you're cheering? And she goes, well, sometimes we go up into the suites and say hi to like sponsors and stuff. And out of my mouth, unbelievably came, well, don't you get sweaty? Seriously, that's what I said. And then I'm just in my mind going, oh, you idiot. And then, you know what she said to me? She goes, we don't sweat, we perspire, in this charming little voice. I'm like, she just bailed me out.
Well, a comeback.
She totally bailed me
out. She did. And just straight So
that's when I thought there was a chance. I had a chance. And then I found out like later I drove a Bronco, Ford Bronco. I had a dog. She liked that I decorated for Christmas, even though I was a single guy. And, I thought that she would, be dating this European male model driving a Porsche, and yet she liked this Bogan who drives she liked that I had a dog and all those things.
You just said you like decorating for Christmas. What? So we talking all the stuff in the front yard? Is that what you're talking about? The lights like Griswold or what?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and especially I do it now because if you have kids, the kids want that. But this was back when I was single. So I would go get a tree every year. I'd put it up. I'd get Christmas lights. I'd put Christmas lights around the house. And she knew that I was single and lived there alone. So she liked that part. I mean, stupid little things like that, that I never thought would have gotten me a girlfriend. But, it all worked out. So
what year was this? So you were playing for the Seahawks. How many years into your career were you?
About 4 years. 4 years in, I met Shannon, and then we started dating.
Did you have to keep it?
Season.
You had to keep it like quiet. Like, could you tell people you were dating, or like?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was one of those things that just was kind of frowned upon.
Yeah,
but
right.
Shannon was like one of the captains or whatever, and I know
Gotcha.
the head gal just loved her. But then she stopped doing it the next year in '92 when I played in Seattle.
Right.
And then we got married in '93 and went off to Denver. So poor Shannon, my wife. I mean, she got married, got pregnant, and got yanked out of her hometown all within like 3 or 4 months, and didn't know anybody. Had to coordinate our move out to Denver. She didn't know anyone there. I mean, that was a tough first year of marriage for her. That's for
and
sure.
then and as well as that, she goes to Denver, and she's probably she's going to a game or something. She's probably watching the cheerleaders do their thing, and there she is, with her kid. She's like, "Oh, what just happened? I just pulled the plug on." Yeah, and she's probably critiquing too, going, but it's amazing because I felt the same way with Amanda. We were living in LA. I just moved all my crap into her place in LA, and like, oh, here I am, and then boom, she's trying to pursue her thing, and she's acting, and here I come, just complete distraction. And she's up. We got kids up to Seattle and everything else. I'm like, that was kind of my fault. Sorry about that. Yeah.
So when you asked her to marry, like, were you like me? Like, are you sure you want to marry me?
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. It's like, you sure you want to go down that road? But hey, Dave, this has been awesome, mate. I'm glad we finally got that. I'm going to take you up on that offer too. I'm going to be over there at your place, and you're going to give me the ins and outs. I'm going to sit there with and just start ripping on American sport, not publicly. No, I'm just kidding.
You can say what a bunch of babies they are.
Yeah.
Why do they got to wear those helmets and pads?
Exactly. Yeah. You ever played rugby or
no?
Never
did. I would end up bashing my head in probably because, I mean, that's the thing. When you have a helmet, I mean, you're going to hit people. I mean, my helmet was my weapon, and I know you're not supposed to do that now, but the only thing I wanted to hit on an opposing player when he came to block me was his head with my head, so that's a different philosophy nowadays.
Oh yeah, for sure. Awesome, Dave. Hey, I appreciate it, man. And
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I'll catch you Tuesday at 3:30 on Bob. It's still Bob, Dave, and more.
Bob, Dave, and more. Yep.
All right, I didn't mess that up.
We always say that, like, if we decide to get rid of Jim, we'll just take an O out because it's MOORE, and we can just say Bob, Dave, and more.
Yeah.
So
there you go. Awesome, mate.
Thanks,
I appreciate it. Yeah, that was great. Thanks, man. What's up, guys? Hope you enjoyed that episode with Dave Wyman. What an absolute legend. I'm going to have him on again for sure. We had way too much stuff to cover. I always get to my little time limit. I can try and keep it around an hour. I've just got way too much stuff to say, but I'll have him on again for sure. Anyway, baseball's about to start up pretty soon. Can't wait. Make sure you hit me up on www.thetopstep.com. You can message me, ask me for requests, stories, everything. And make sure you click that subscribe button. I know I say it all the time, sound like a broken record, but this has been a blast. I love doing my podcast. I've been getting some awesome feedback. It's a lot of fun. I want to keep doing it. So help it out. All right, guys. We'll see you next week on The Top Step.
Killing them, killing them, killing them, killing them, killing them, killing them, killing them.